For all of you new students out there that do not yet know me, my name is Miss Lee, and I am Dean of Global and Diversity Education. And before I begin my speech this morning, I guess I should tell you that what I'm going to share with you today is pretty emotional for me. And while I hope you walk away this morning thinking about themes such as perseverance and service, more importantly, I hope you walk away more determined to make the best of each and every day of your life, including each precious moment you spend at Taft. So let me begin with sharing my story. And I'll start the story by stating that last year was by far the most challenging of my life. I had ended last summer having lost my grandmother in Texas, and in a matter of weeks, I would soon lose one of my best girlfriends in the world, Kosi Sebeko, in South Africa. And while I had a chance to say my goodbyes to my grandmother, the opposite was true of Kosi. I did not have a chance to hug, hold, and kiss her goodbye. My heart was quite sore as I mourned her passing. So, of course, I would never have guessed that within less than a month, my grandmother in Ohio would have a heart attack and pass away. This was something I was certainly not prepared for, as my grandmother in Ohio, who I affectionately called Mother, was my most trusted confidant in the world. I relied on Mother for her wisdom, guidance, and strength throughout my life. I literally spoke to her most every evening. She was my rock and loved me, my family, friends, and anyone she would meet unconditionally. As expressed in the African proverb Ubuntu, meaning, I am because you are, I would say that the best of me is because of Mother. My love for humanity, commitment to service, and belief in servant leadership is because of what I saw Mother live throughout her life. See, she is the person that taught me that where much is given, much is required. She always reminded me that all one's opportunities and achievements in life come with enormous responsibility. Similar to lawyer advocate Marian Wright Edelman, she held the philosophy that service is the very purpose of life. It is the rent we pay for living on this planet. And as I always say, if I can only live this ideal half the way she did, I will have lived a good life. So, after having lost both of my grandmothers in Kosi, I thought I had experienced enough loss for hopefully a long time coming. But obviously, the universe did not agree with me. A month after Mother passed, the day after Thanksgiving, our family home in Ohio burned down. Yes, literally most everything I personally owned, my tangible memories from my childhood, high school, college, and most of my adult life were gone. All the high school athletic, music, and academic awards I told you about at last year's morning meeting had all been consumed in the fire. And by this time, I was almost numb to the feeling of loss. Trying to stay positive, I thought to myself when I returned to Taft after Thanksgiving that given the recent passing of the women closest to me, I should probably have some health checkups. And going into Christmas break, I had actually forgotten that I had gone to see numerous doctors upon returning to Taft after Thanksgiving. That is, until I received a surprisingly shocking call the day after Christmas. It was my Ob-Gen's office telling me that they spotted something from my mammogram readings. And for those of you that are unfamiliar, a mammogram is an X-ray photography of the breast. They needed me to come in the next day for another mammogram and a breast ultrasound. In a comforting tone, they told me they thought it was just a cyst in my breast, but they just needed to make sure. Long story short, it was not a cyst. It was a tumor, and now I needed to have a biopsy to see if it was cancer. When the doctor told me I had the tumor and needed to have a biopsy, so many things crossed my mind. I honestly had never been personally so distressed in my entire life. This was certainly a time in my life when I had to dig deep. All I could think about was my family, friends, students, and the work that I love and am so passionate about. And while Mr. McMullen was most supportive, I nevertheless became deeply saddened at the thought of having to change my lifestyle. If you understand my philosophy about life, then you can understand even more why I became disheartened. See, I share author James Michener's philosophy about life, in which he says, the master in the art of living makes little distinction between his or her work and his or her play, his or her labor and his or her leisure, his or her mind and his or her body, his or her information and his or her recreation, his or her love and his or her religion. She or he hardly knows which is which. He or she simply pursues his or her vision of excellence at whatever he or she does, leaving others to decide whether he or she is working or playing. To him or her, he or she is always doing both. So for me, the worst case scenario of teaching less classes, not being able to work on community service and MLK Day, Model UN, Global Journal, Red Rhino Foundation, or the grant for building Taft, a Center for Global Leadership and Service, was a threat to my work and play. That is my life. Nevertheless, I knew I needed to schedule the biopsy, and the week before MLK, I scheduled the procedure. Fortunately, I soon found out that the tumor was benign, and when I thought I could not cry anymore, I found out I was wrong. Unlike before, however, I was now crying tears of joy. So grateful for my life, I soon began to reevaluate my purpose in life. And while I have come to a lot of things, my instinctual resolve to live my life to its fullest has become stronger than ever. And while I still have a tumor in my breast and am under surveillance by my doctors, I share my story because I want you to know that life is not always a crystal stair, as Langston Hughes once said. Nevertheless, you have to keep climbing and climbing, or in other words, persevere, have courage, and keep the faith despite what obstacles come your way. So in this spirit, I purpose within myself this summer to create and have one of the most amazing trips of my life. My trip was a part of an ongoing effort to prepare a service, culture, and World Cup trip for Taft students to Brazil. The trip took me from Rio to the Atlantic rainforest, to Foz do Iguaçu, to Argentina and Sao Paulo. Upon landing in Rio, I quickly found my transfer to the bus station and embarked on a 7-hour bus ride to the Atlantic rainforest. Now, upon hearing 7-hour bus ride, I'm sure many of you think that it must have been an unbearable journey, but it was quite the opposite. The ride into the rainforest was the most amazing, spectacular sight. Now, I have been to some beautiful places in the world, but the rainforest literally is so stunning that it is indescribable. While in the rainforest, I stayed at a research and education center called Iracambi. The work and research of Iracambi is centered in sustainable management, ecology, and conservation of the Atlantic Brazilian rainforest. While there, I was a sponge, eager to learn and excited to organize a service and education trip for Taft students. And while I learned that the Atlantic rainforest has more biodiversity than the Amazon due to the difference in topography of both forests, and that mining of bauxite and iron is one of the biggest challenges to the preservation of the rainforest, the most exhilarating piece of my journey was hiking the high trail to collect the cameras where this mountain lion was last sighted. Now, to be really honest, it wasn't until I got deep into the forest that it hit me that I was hiking on foot in the land of mountain lions and jaguars. When I lived in South Africa, I had seen plenty of lions when driving through Kruger Park, but that is a very different experience than the thought of seeing a lion or jaguar while hiking on foot. By the time I realized what I had committed to, I was deep into the forest, and well on my way up this 4,000-foot mountain to collect the cameras with 2 other researchers. And while I did get scared for a minute, I soon got over my fear by A, praying, and B, remembering everything I had been through over the past year and telling myself, you only live once, make the most of the experience. By the time we got a quarter of the way up, I was certainly exhausted. But I soon found my second wind because I needed to find my way down the high trail. I did not want to leave the rainforest, and while I knew that I had a lot to look forward to on the rest of my journey, I was thrilled to find that my trip would get even better. Now, for the sake of time, I won't take you through all the details of the rest of my journey, but I will show another highlight of the trip for me, which some may suspect may have been my Sunday morning stroll along Copacabana Beach in Rio de Janeiro. But actually, it wasn't. It was instead my journey to Foz do Iguaçu in Argentina that topped off my trip. For those of you that are not familiar, Foz do Iguaçu is a UNESCO World Heritage Site that sits on the border of Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay. It is 1.67 miles of 275 waterfalls. I would have never imagined that I would have seen falls more beautiful than Victoria Falls on the border of Zambia and Zimbabwe when I lived in Africa, but I was wrong. What is amazing about Foz do Iguaçu is crossing over into Argentina and seeing different images of the fall. When I thought it couldn't get any better, I found out that I could take a speedboat into the falls. Besides me being naturally adventurous, I thought to myself upon learning of a speedboat, of course, I have to try this out because I must make sure that it is safe for Taft students, right? So, as you can see, I rode into the falls and honestly had a blast enjoying nature and life. And now I am really excited about the opportunity of taking Taft students to Brazil. Again, the opportunity to explore Brazil could not have come at a more perfect time. After a year of tremendous loss, I gained a summer of a lifetime. And as my grandmother would expect of me, I want to share that with you. So, you will hear more from me in the near future about opportunities to learn and serve in Brazil. But in the meantime, I hope as you go through the rest of this year and your life, that you remember that life is not always a crystal stair, but if you keep persevering, you'll be sure to find the light at the end of the tunnel. Be strong, and God bless. Thanks.